During the Great Depression of the 1930s, most people couldn't afford the luxuries they had once considered staples of a happy home. Homelessness skyrocketed, and outdoor camps nicknamed Hoovervilles popped up all around the country. Some were more fortunate, however. The Robles family of Tucson, Arizona owned their own electric company and were able to maintain their livelihoods while others watched theirs slip away. On April 25, 1934, the Robles' 6-year-old daughter June was kidnapped by a stranger waiting outside her school. The ransom note came later, and the subsequent events changed the Robles' lives forever. This week on Out of the Past, the Kidnapping of June Robles. Kidnapping was incredibly common in the 1930s. It's been referred to as a forgotten epidemic. Children were taken all the time, whether by someone seeking ransom or someone with more nefarious motives. In June's case, the motivation seems strictly financial, but the events didn't play out the way you would expect. April 25th had begun like any other day for Fernando and Helen's family. Fernando was off to work by 8, then Helen took June to school before heading over to the family store. June spent the day at school before she was taken at 3 p.m. A man in a silver sedan told her he was going to take her to her father's electrical supply store. There were plenty of witnesses outside June's school that day, and all of them described the kidnapper in the same way, very tall and thin, driving a Ford sedan. The mother of one of June's classmates witnessed the entire exchange. She never suspected anything untoward was going on. She assumed the man taking June was a family member or a family friend. Unfortunately, she was severely mistaken. A ransom note showed up at the family store just a couple of hours later. A small boy named Rosalio Estrada had been paid 25 cents to hand the ransom note to June's father, Fernando, while he was working at the family electrical store. It's worth noting that June's parents had no idea she was even missing at this point. June usually went to her aunt's house after school, and her parents usually didn't see her until dinner time. The ransom letter came as if out of nowhere, and the Robles had to confirm that June was actually missing before they could proceed. The note was clear, $15,000, and they could have their child back. June's father began communicating with his daughter's captor or captors, who signed the correspondence with the letters XYZ. Their instructions were confusing. They told Fernando he would need to go on a wild goose chase, driving around making stops in different areas all around the state of Arizona. Fernando commanded the young man who gave him the letter to run back into the street and find the person who gave it to him, but had no luck finding him. The boy did provide a description, though, and it matched the descriptions others gave. Tall and thin, driving a Ford sedan. Some articles suggest that Fernando was reluctant to involve the police in the matter, especially so he wouldn't upset the kidnappers. In reality, the first person Fernando ran to was his twin brother Carlos, who happened to be a deputy attorney at the county courthouse. They didn't involve the police force until time had passed, however, treating it as a family matter for the first few hours. Once they were certain the child was gone, they began putting together a search party and setting up traffic stops. Highway Superintendent C.R. McDowell was infuriated by the fact that the Arizona Star broke the news so quickly. He claimed that had they not published the information so early, he could have set up blocks on all the routes out of town much earlier. June's parents were shocked that their daughter would get into a car with a stranger. But her playmates told her mother that the man wasn't a stranger. He'd visited the schoolyard several times, and children had seen June speaking with him. The gray sedan had been combing the neighborhood, making stops for weeks. Locals expressed concern about the man, but they never dreamed he'd actually take one of the children. This guy was watching June very intently, learning her personal schedule, like how she went to her aunt's house every day after school. An enormous army of volunteers showed up to look for this little girl. Almost 300 civilians and 50 legionnaires showed up before dawn to start searching. At times, it seemed like complete strangers cared more about bringing June home than some of her family members. The evening of April 25th was an unpleasant one in the Robles household. June and her family lived with June's grandfather, Burnaby Robles. Fernando didn't have the money to pay to get his child back. His father, on the other hand, was one of the richest men in the state. Fernando asked Burnaby to help him pay the ransom to get his little girl back. June's grandfather refused. He argued with his son, telling him that the Limburgs paid ransom for a child that was already dead. He said it made them look like fools, and he would never tie his money up in such an ordeal. He would have to move funds around to get the cash, and he simply refused to do it, reportedly arguing that if that meant sacrificing June, so be it. Fernando's brother Barney agreed. The media clung to this case the same way they do when any little rich girl goes missing. June was front-page news for days. The media dubbed the hunt for her kidnappers the greatest manhunt in the West. Soon, the kidnapping that Mr. Robles wanted to keep in the family was all anyone could talk about. Headlines interfered with police progress. The Arizona Star was particularly at odds with law enforcement, printing several headlines that might have interfered with June's rescue effort. There were several noteworthy investigators on the operation, including Colby Schrock, Jake Farrar, who originally made the call for volunteers, and Agent Andres and Lewis Taylor, both special agents with the FBI. The feds didn't learn about the crime until the 26th. They were upset that they hadn't been informed earlier, and they immediately sent Andres and Taylor to Tucson. Hopes were high when the second ransom letter arrived. This letter changed the terms, lowering the ransom to $10,000 if the family acted quickly. This note contained similar language to the first, but was only signed with a Z. Jake Farrar examined the document and deemed it authentic. The FBI told Farrar to shut down the search. With a child missing for more than 30 hours, it was unlikely that someone was just going to stumble upon her. It was time to change their strategy, and they needed to start following leads. Something strange came up in the investigation. Supposedly, a few days before the kidnapping, a little girl named Dora from Carrillo School had been telling the other children that a little girl was going to be snatched outside. Later, the teacher had a talk with Dora, asking her if what she said was true. Dora said no, but on that same day, Carrillo School got a phone call from a person asking if a June Robles was a pupil there. Unable to remember all of the pupils' names, the principal asked classrooms of kids whether any of them were June Robles. One girl raised her hand and told the principal she didn't know a June Robles, but she did know a June Robles who was a pupil at another school. A call was made to June's real school, but nothing came of it. Perhaps if someone had connected the phone call with Dora's rumor, things would have turned out differently. But to those living through it, all of these events probably seemed random and unrelated. Agents set up shop inside the Robles residence. Agent Andres stayed in the home most of the time, attempting to eavesdrop. Unfortunately, the members of the family mostly spoke Spanish at home, so he wasn't able to gather any information about the family. Other members of law enforcement traveled all around the state pursuing leads, not one of them leading to anything significant. When the FBI asked to look at the ransom letter, they were astonished. Everybody in town had handled the note. It had been crumpled up and put in someone's pocket. It would be impossible to pull the kidnapper's latent prints from the piece of paper. At that time, there was something else significant that Farrar had to tell Special Agent Andres. He had fabricated the second note. He told the agent he hoped it would inspire more communication with the kidnappers. This left the agents with absolutely no forensic evidence to test. The FBI agents put pressure on June's grandfather, but Burnaby was still hesitant. He eventually withdrew $8,000 from an account, $7,000 short of what the family needed. The agents asked him for the money, but he made it clear, no child, no money. He needed to know that June was safe before he would give anyone a cent. The third ransom note came on April 30th, by mail.
You do not regard what we say. You better listen to us. We're not fooling with you and the officers. Don't think we are suckers. We know what we're doing. You have been dirty in this. Look what a stir, but child's life is in your hand.
This letter, like the first one, contained two parts: the ransom letter and the instructions for Mr. Robles. This authentic letter again asked for the full $15,000 and gave Fernando a new wild goose chase to go on with the promise of getting his daughter back. They ordered Fernando to get the $15,000 and drive 125 miles toward Gila Bend, then drive back toward Red Rock every night until he saw someone wave a white flag. That would mean it was time for the exchange. The rest of the note read,
"This is your last chance. You will not get other instructions. Keep all secret. You better get spies and cops clear away this time. Goodbye. XYZ. Obey."
The kidnapper used the word obey in all of his correspondence with the Robles family. By now, June had been missing for more than 5 days. The likelihood that June was alive lessened with every hour. Fernando didn't want to drive those distances unless he knew June was actually alive. He wrote a letter that was published in the papers. He provided 4 questions that only June would know the answers to. If he could get the answers, he would know she was really out there. $10,000 short of the requested payment, Fernando set out every night to drive the route, even though he hadn't received answers to his questions yet. The route was grueling, and Fernando came home weary each night. He never saw a white flag. By Sunday, May 7th, he was exhausted, but received news from law enforcement. Someone had snuck in and delivered another letter. This one also made the rounds a little. Carlos Robles opened it before police could test it. The letter read,
What do you do with your bunnies in the morning? Give them water and feed them. What do you call Corny? A stool pigeon. What is the name of Bettina's maid? Antonia. Where's your little box with the key in it? Lawyer Lecce has it in his office. Your child is okay. We told you to be alone and drive slow and keep spies away. Why don't you do as you are told? You will never get your child until you do what we say. Are you driving car we told you to? Take the doors off car so we can see you. We are not going to keep telling you.
This letter obviously gave Fernando newfound faith that he could find his daughter June alive. He obeyed the letter and took the doors off his car. June's grandfather reluctantly gave Fernando $5,000 in cash. He now had 2/3 of the ransom money, and he issued another public statement telling the kidnappers he could only raise the $10,000. The Robles family was filled with hope. Fernando intended to set out on the route the next day, but before he could leave, his brother Carlos called to say he had bad news. They had received another communication. Unfortunately, this letter revealed where June was buried.
Governor, tell B. Robles where his child is. 1/4 mile east where Rincon Way ceases to be straight, then 150 steps north. Child is under some old cactus burrs. Child is about 1 mile east of Wilmot Road and 150 steps north of Rincon Way. XYZ. Obey.
Carlos and his twin brother Fernando decided they had to go out there and get the body before June's mother had a chance to see it. They wanted to do it themselves, not wanting strangers to stare at their 6-year-old's dead body. Carlos and Fernando became dehydrated as they traveled. It was incredibly hot. It was surprising that anything lived out there. After a long while, Fernando found a white rag tied to a key lying on top of a metal plank. June's father lifted the metal, preparing himself to see his daughter's dead body beneath it. It was pitch black. He spoke into the metal box beneath. "Hello?" "Hello there," the little girl answered back. June was alive. She had been kept in a cage buried underground for 19 days. Over those days, temperatures were outrageously hot. June had burns on her nose from where she had accidentally knocked her head on the metal above her. She had all sorts of snacks that her captors brought her. She also had an overflowing bucket she used for a toilet and was covered in her own waste. Somehow, the little bits of food and water she had were able to keep her alive underground for more than 2 weeks. Her father pulled her out of the hole, and she wrapped herself around him like a toddler. June didn't have much to say about her time underground. She repeatedly cried for her mother for the first few days, but a man yelled at her to stop. She did, afraid that someone would hurt her if she continued. The man had driven the little girl into the desert for what seemed like hours to her. Once they got to their destination, she met another man, and both men ordered her into the metal cage in the dirt. She was very specific about the foods they brought her that she liked and those that she didn't. She told her father that they put a chain around her ankle that hurt because it was too tight. She told one of the men and they switched it to the other leg. It didn't help much. In the 19 days she'd been underground, her captors had only visited her 4 or 5 times. She hadn't slept much in the time she'd been down there. It was too hot in the daytime and too cold in the evenings. June was completely sleep-deprived. She was also bored, as you would expect a child to be. She made little toys for herself out of the wrappers her food came in. Dolls made of cellophane. June's one regret was leaving her report card in the cage. She got it the day she was kidnapped and was proud of her marks. She wanted to go back so she could show her mother, but her father said no. What she needed was to go home. June was interviewed by multiple news outlets, and by and large, she seemed unfazed. I'll have a link to a newsreel where June is being interviewed. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. After being rescued, June moved on to live a long, healthy life, passing away in 2014. Her obituary didn't even mention her captivity. She was married to the same man for 64 years, and they had 4 children together. She was a lucky girl, and thankfully got to live a full life. Law enforcement never learned who kidnapped the 6-year-old. Not many theories exist in the true crime community. Some think the family may have been involved. Some blame her father, while others point the finger at her grandfather, Burnaby. Given the story's age and lack of evidence, it's unlikely that we'll ever know what happened to June in that afternoon in 1934. After June returned home safely, motivation to find the culprit slowed significantly until nobody was investigating at all. Nothing happened for a long time until over a year later when an unnamed man confessed to the kidnapping on his deathbed. He implicated 2 other men as well. This confession was taken seriously by some, but doubted by others. No arrests were made based on the dying man's words. The FBI opened the case to reinvestigate a few years after it happened, but again, nothing came of it. That's all for this week. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you next time on Out of the Past.